All right, so today's lesson 3.3. Here's your warm-up. Go ahead and pause the video and do your work. See you in a few minutes. Okay, vertical angles, as you know, are angles created when two lines intersect. They are the angles that are opposite from each other and they are congruent. So those are vertical angles, and these are also vertical angles. Supplementary angles are angles that add up to 180 degrees, or you could also call them a linear pair. And then example 3, I've got a big line segment that's equal to 39 meters, and then I've got two littler line segments that one is 2x minus 8, the other one is x plus 17. Nowhere in my given information or in my drawing does it give any indication that the two line segments are congruent or that B is the midpoint. So the only thing that you can do is set up your equation as 2x minus 8 plus x plus 17 has to equal 39. And then you can go ahead and solve for x and find the length of each of the line segments. All right, here are your table of contents and your objective. Pause the video, please, and write that in your notebook. All right, so last lesson, we talked about this stuff in figure B right here. So I had two lines cut by a transversal. So these are my two lines right here. This guy's my transversal. And then we talked about the 8 angle pair relationships that were created by the transversal. So for example, we talked about alternating interior angles, which are these two. We talked about alternating exterior angles, which are these guys. We talked about corresponding angles, which would be angles that have the same position. And then we also talked about interior same side. So we talked about these two guys. All right, so today we're going to kind of talk about the same thing, except this time our two lines are going to be parallel to each other. So for example, line L and line M are parallel. So you can see the special markings on the diagram itself. This indicates that the lines are parallel. And then down here at the bottom, line L is parallel to line M. That's the special notation that means parallel. And then line N, which is this guy right here, that is the transversal. That's the one cutting through the two parallel lines and creating all those 8 angles. When two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, 2 angle measures can be used to determine the measure of all 8 of the angles. So I got a lot of congruent angles going on when my lines are parallel. So I've got like these and these guys and this guy and this guy are all congruent. And if you can kind of see what's going on here, it's going back and forth across the line. And as you get better and more accustomed to looking at this stuff, you can see which angles are congruent to each other. For example, this one is an acute angle, certainly not congruent to this one, which is obtuse, but they still have a special relationship, and that's what we're going to talk about today. All right, so there is a better picture of your 8 angles created by your parallel lines. Now looking at this, I can clearly see if I know that these two lines are parallel, which they are right here, it's labeled as such, then I can say that since this is the acute angle, and this is an acute angle, and this is an acute angle, and this is an acute angle, that all 4 of those angles are congruent, because I only have 2 angle measures to account for the whole thing. Then I can go back and I also can say that the obtuse angles, the larger angles, bigger than 90 and less than 180, those are going to also be congruent to each other. So you only have 2 angle measures, one's going to be acute, one's going to be obtuse, unless of course you have the special situation where they are both 90. When two, we already talked about that, skip. All right, so when 2 parallel lines are cut by a transversal, alternating interior angles are congruent. So the angles on the inside, on opposite sides of the transversal, are congruent. All right, in your notes, alternating exterior angles are also congruent. So draw yourself a little picture, or write the definition, and get it all in your notes, please. Corresponding angles are congruent. All right, so again, write the definition and draw yourself a little image so you have a picture to look at when you go back to review your notes. Interior consecutive, also called same side angles, are supplementary. Okay, so they have to add up to be 180. So you could use your corresponding angles to try and figure that out. If this guy is 60, the corresponding angles that we just talked about means this has to also be 60 because the lines are parallel. And since these two guys are supplementary, they have to add up to be 180 altogether. So by default, these two then are also have to be 180. When two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, exterior same side angles are supplementary also, and I could use the same concept. If this is 60, my supplementary angles say that that has to also be 60, which means these two have to be 180. All right, so when solving for angle measures for two parallel lines cut by a transversal, one of two things must be true. Either the angles are going to be congruent to each other, or the two angles are going to be supplementary. In other words, they're going to add up to 180 degrees. So you only have two options here. All right, we talked about this Z-point check system in class. I like to use it. It helps me when I'm not sure. Okay, so I'm going to put a point at each of my intersection points and put a point in the middle. So I'm going to start at a point here and touch an angle, switch direction, go through the other point, touch an angle, switch direction, go through the other point, touch an angle. All of the angles on the Z are congruent. These are all going to be congruent. If it is not on the Z, then they are supplementary. 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 Okay? Any two angles that do not fall on the Z are supplementary. All right. Are these angles congruent or supplementary? So it looks to me like they are both obtuse angles. I can also tell from the drawing that the lines are parallel. So since they are both obtuse angles, they have to be congruent to each other. And I think that those are called, here's my parallel lines, here's my transversal. These are on the outside of the two lines, and they are on opposite sides of the transversal. So I'm going to call those alternating exterior. And that means they have to be equal to each other. So 2x plus 19 has to equal x plus 23. And you could go ahead and solve for x, and I think x ends up being 4. All right, so congruent or supplementary. Since the lines are parallel, are marked parallel over here on the way left, that means that these are alternating interior angles, which makes them congruent. And then your equation is you're going to set them equal to each other. So 2x minus 12 equals 3x plus 34. All right, so here we go. These are vertical angles, which means they are equal to each other, which makes them congruent. So again, x plus 27 has to equal to x minus 17, and then you can go ahead and do the math and figure it out. All right, congruent or supplementary. All right, so first of all, let's see what kind of angles these are. These are same side interior, because they're both on the inside, and they're both on the same side of the transversal. The lines are parallel, which means that they have to add, okay, by looking at them, you can clearly see that they are not congruent to each other. That's an obtuse angle, and that is an acute angle. So they are not going to be equal to each other this time. This is going to be our second option where I have to add them to be 180. So 2x plus 42 plus x minus 24 has to equal 180. And then you can go ahead and solve for x and find the angle measures from there. All right, these are a linear pair, which makes them supplementary. Notice that they make a line. They're supplementary, linear pair, which means when I add them together, when I add these two together, I should get 180. And there's your equation. All right, these are parallel lines by the markings given, and these are corresponding angles, which means they have to be equal to each other. And you can see that the angles look like they have the same measure, so they would be equal to each other. So 2x plus 52 has to equal 3x minus 35. And then go ahead and solve for x. All right, homework 3.3 due tomorrow. Have a nice day. Oh wait, just kidding. I wanted to go over example 1 on the homework because I had some students questioning on what the question was asking in class. So you have to state what the angle measures are and how do you know that. Okay, so right now I can see that these two lines are parallel. They gave me this angle of 118, and I'm going to compare it to this angle of angle 1. So I can conclude that the measure of angle 1 is also 118 degrees because they are corresponding angles. Okay? Now I'm going to compare the measure of 118, okay, same angle, to angle 2, and the lines are still parallel, same as they were before, except this angle 2 is also going to be 118, but for a different reason. It's going to be 118 because those are alternating exterior angles. Okay, so that's what you have to do for the first few problems on the worksheet. Now I'm really done, and we'll see you tomorrow.